First exercise. First exercise is getting the cap off. Fantastic, yes. Using only the toe of the marker, make an arc. Okay. Make another arc. Make another arc. So just a few arcs, just some gentle arcs, like so. Okay. Again, using the toe of the marker, with just the toe contacting the paper, put the toe of the marker on that arc and pull it while lifting. Pull and lift, pull and lift, pull and lift, pull and lift. Try to change the direction, try to overlap, try to line up, give it a little bit of variation in direction. So contact and pull and lift, 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 lift. Okay? Looks like those centipedes that run across my living room floor. Yeah. Anyway. Okay? So again, with just the contact of the toe of the marker on that arc, it's essentially a flicking motion. Flick, 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 flick. But try to get some variation in direction, in length, and in frequency. I'll give you two guesses as to what this is. Any Floridians here?
False tree.
Ah, there we go. Yeah. Okay. So, Mediterranean, Arabian Peninsula, Iberian Peninsula, Floridian Peninsula. There, yeah. These are palm fronds. So try to get variation, overlap, frequency, and stroke length. Just get as much variation as you can. And practice those, several of those. So just as get some spacing in there, you'll notice that if you get a lot of overlap, then the marker ink starts to bleed together. So you do have to space them out a little bit just to give that desired effect. All right? Feel pretty good? How are the Prismacolors doing? Good? Doing good? Now, see if you can, you're pulling a motion, but also see if you can do a pushing motion, that upward. If you can push it as well as pull it. So this will start to just train the muscles in your fingers and your wrist to control the marker in this sort of, this back and forth motion between your fingers, okay? See if you can push away from your dominant hand. See if you can pull towards your dominant hand. All of that gives variation in stroke length and in character. And the more randomness you can get here, the more organic it looks, right? If all of your stroke lengths look the same, it's going to look plastic, fake, right? The more variation you have, the more natural it looks. Okay? What do you think? Feel good? Feel okay? All right. Exercise 2. We call it the sweep. With the full chisel of the marker contacting the paper. In this case, the toe of the marker is pointing away from my dominant hand. I start and sweep back and forth until I can get just a dot. Smaller and smaller and smaller until it's just a dot. Smaller and smaller and still just a dot. Just a dot. This is a watercolor technique transferred to the markers. And again, this is the muscles in your hand and fingers doing this back and forth kind of motion. Sweep to a dot. Your arm is moving in a direction as well. So there's a couple of different things going on there. Okay, so try that. Called the sweeping, we also call it feathering. So you're controlling a back and forth motion with your fingers, but you're also moving the arm in a general direction until you're basically lifting off the marker. You can do variations of this, smaller ones, until that bead of color just disappears into a dot. Use this a lot when we're layering up color. Okay. Pretty straightforward. All right. Now, we're going to change that up a bit. We're going to do a variation of this. The variation is that we're going to rotate the barrel of the marker while we're doing it. Ah! All right. So we're already doing two things, weren't we? We were tracking the marker up and down and pulling it with, in a general direction with the entire arm. Now we're going to add a spinning of the barrel between the thumb, middle finger, and forefinger. We're essentially rotating along the side of your middle finger. So sweeping but also turning, sweeping and turning, sweeping and turning, sweeping. Takes a little more dexterity. So I'm rotating the barrel of the marker while sweeping and pulling. Rotating the barrel of the marker while sweeping and pulling. Rotate, rotate. So your hand and arm are actually doing three things at once. Okay. Now, variation on this. While rotating the marker in your hand, rotating it between your thumb, middle finger, and forefinger, we're going to lift up and down in the sort of pointillism. So what this is allowing now is for the toe and the chisel of the marker to make different size marks. So while I'm rotating the marker, I'm contacting the paper, trying to make different size marks. As much varied pointillism as possible. Okay, And these are the preliminary exercises that we will use to build trees and foliage. Underlay layer, we're going to build up an underlay of information which we will draw the tree from. So it's just starting with a ground plane of some kind, just as a base for which the tree to grow. You can use pen or, I'm going to grab a colored pencil or a pencil for this. So it's visible. So just start with a base plane, so a ground plane. We're gonna draw a tree and essentially section or elevation view, straight elevation view. We're going to draw it pretty big, so representing probably half an inch equals a foot. And it'll take up most of a landscape orientation of paper here. The graph paper there is just to sort of give you a guide of straightness there. So we're essentially just to draw now an 8.5 inch tall tree. I want to establish a top arc as the sort of the limit of the canopy itself. Just so an arc about like that, just establishing the upper limit of the tree itself between the ground plane and the upper part of the canopy. So just a nice loose arc there. Take this distance now and divide it into thirds. 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Take that general distance now and divide it into thirds. Okay. This will show up really well. All right. This is roughly ½ inch equals a foot. So now, with a marker color, with the toe of the marker pointing away from your dominant hand, we're going to take the full chisel of the marker and start at the ground plane, like so. Just hold it there. And then slowly work our way up. As we go from here to here, we're going to make a quarter turn. Watch me do it first. Full chisel, quarter turn. What does that do? Okay, so it makes a tapered shape, doesn't it? Okay. So full chisel, quarter turn on the way up, and let it go. That's sort of the main trunk of this deciduous tree. So in that first third, we have the body of the trunk, and then it immediately starts to divide into the tapered primary branch coming from that first third. Also in this lower third, now take the heel of the marker and push some primary branches away from that general 1/3 area. Push with the heel of the marker away from that general area. You could almost think of these as radius points. This is the first third, this is the second third, this is the third third. So we could almost think about this as radii. Okay? Those primary branches now are reaching up and pushing nutrition to the upper parts of the tree. Now, somewhere around this second third, take the toe of the marker and start to create some secondary branches from the primary branches. That general area, not exactly that line, but that just general area of that secondary 1/3. These are now the secondary branches, the second level of nutrition. Photosynthesis, sugars, and water, right, flowing through these lines of nutrition. We're also drawing the tree exactly as it grows, right, from the ground up, not from the top down. And then finally, using that flicking motion with just the toe of the marker, I'm just going to add a few tertiaries. Not many. We'll let line work do the most of the work there, but bless you. But just kind of touch some general guidelines of tertiary branches in that area. And this now gives you a general underlay of 3 levels of nutrition, from trunk to primary branch to secondary branch to tertiary branch up to the top of the tree itself. So I'll tape that down. Look at the direction now. Remember, everything is still kind of pointing down to this central point, aren't they? These are fanning out, kind of pointing back to this sort of central direction where those first primary branches are coming from the trunk itself. Another piece of trace. What the marker has done now is given us some widths that we can respond to. So starting from the ground plane, there's maybe a few grasses down here or something like that, or little subliminal messages to your client. Please pay me. Some general marks to establish the ground plane itself. And then starting from the ground and working our way up, using the general width as suggested by the marker. We'll use this as a general outline to trace over. And start to give some character to these primary branches. Some hash marks and dots and things to sort of suggest the character of bark. Some vertical hatch, some dots, and some curvature lines. Where those then divide now, we'll start to continue that level of nutrition coming out into the secondary branches, using the marker guidelines below on the underlay as a general guide of that divide of nutrition and water, passing from the leaves down to the trunk, and then with sugars and minerals from the soil being pushed out to the different parts of the tree. This gives general width and character to the primary and secondary branches. If you switch up your technique, every tree that you draw will be slightly different. No two trees that you ever will draw at this scale will ever look the same again. The more variation you have, the more natural that the tree looks as you do these over the years. We have a general sense of where the limit is. So I'm going to extend now thin tertiary branches, twigs, if you will, to that general limit of the canopy, keeping in mind to extend some out elsewhere as well. They don't only exist up here in this upper third. We've got little twigs and tertiary branches that exist all over, unless of course it's a very pruned tree, very maintained tree. But they generally stop at where we put that arc, which establishes the general canopy, top canopy of this tree. Again, they can overlap, cross over. We're just pulling these very light, fine liner lines to suggest these tertiary level branches. And I'm coming back into the primary and secondaries. I'm adding a few more here and there, until I'm comfortable with it. For comparison purposes now, I'll just slide a white piece of paper underneath that. I have the dexterity to do it, that is. So if I slide a piece of paper underneath that, will just show the general character of the line there. Dana, you asked about transparent trees last week. That is a winter tree, right? That's basically winter. So you can layer these up, right, and start to really give the impression of either winter or early spring with no foliage on the branches out. So that's a winter tree. We're not done with it yet, though. We could stop there, and that's a very nice winter scene that we could start to build up. And there's beautiful drawings out there by Thomas Wang and other landscape architects of winter trees just kind of layering together, starting to establish a canopy. And so those are very beautiful standalone drawings. But we're not quite done with it yet. So. I'm going to label now this one a front and a back. So front. I'm going to pull it up, take away the underlay, set that aside, because you can use it again. So for another tree. And again, just kind of look at our work here. Then I'm going to flip it over. And I'm going to pull out my greens. Yellow green, apple green, grass green, slate green, emerald green, blueberry. A lot of repeats here. Moss, slate, willow, yellow green, grass green, emerald. I'll I'll line them up in value from dark to light. And different color combinations yield different results. So continue to experiment with things in your catalog, but we're basically going from yellow to purple in the range from yellow-green all the way to blueberry. And I generally like 2 to 3 greens in between those two. So that's just a general rule of thumb that I like when doing a deciduous tree. So what species, landscape architects, what species might this start to resemble? What kind of species are we looking at here? Okay, so honey locust. What else? What else? Maple. All the ash trees are dead, so right. Unfortunately. Okay. All right. So starting with our lightest green, which is yellow-green. Near the sunny top of the tree, where the sun hits the canopy first, we're now going to use that sweeping spinning technique. Sweep and spin, sweep and spin, sweep and spin. That technique we just... Yeah, that's better. Yep. Okay. So sweep and spin. So that technique we just practiced, we're kind of layering in the lighter parts of foliage and what will become the sunny parts of the tree. And then I'll add pointillism, so that turn and turning kind of across the tree there. Okay. So that first layer will be yellow-green in this case. Combination of the sweep and spin as well as the pointillism technique applied across the general area of the canopy of the tree. Okay. Then take your next green, which would be a medium green, might be apple green, might be grass green, might be moss green. Get that ready. So now layer medium green into this. All right, so see how that distribution is there? See how there's negative space in between? You can still see the branches coming through though. So if that's the sunny part, the leaves that are catching the sun, then we want to layer in a medium green underneath those. So this might be apple green, moss green, or grass green. I'm going to layer those in underneath that yellow-green. We generally like to go from lightest green to darkest green. Doesn't mean you can add in a medium green here and there. The AD markers will dissolve each other as you layer them up. It's just that you'll be polluting the tip. They actually do kind of blend really nicely though. So I've got yellow green, apple green, and grass green. Sorry, yellow green, grass green, and now actually slate green already layered into this. Take the toe slate green and I'll just start adding a little bit of darkness. here and there. Emerald green is my darkest green, and I will just, using a pointillism technique, start to get the shaded underbelly of different layers of leaves here. Keeping in mind to sort of keep a little bit of negative space in there. Don't want to overdo it or overlayer it. Bark is rarely brown. Rarely brown. So with a little bit of gray marker, gray number 6, I'm going to take the toe of the marker and just put in a little bit of shaded gray on trunk and primary branches. Bark is rarely brown. It tends to be gray. Finally, with blueberry, I'll take the toe of blueberry, add a little bit of blueberry to the side of the trunk. Blueberry mixes with the gray to give it a little bit of darkness. Then I'm going to, with a pointillism technique, start to layer in blueberry in the deep, dark, shaded areas, just to add a little bit more darkness to my dark greens. The illusion of depth starts to occur there. Gray number 6, cool gray number 6, and a little bit of blueberry. And this is the back. All right, ground cover. So grasses. I'm going to take my blue for this just so we don't get the two different strokes confused. But we go back to the very building blocks that we started the evening with. We basically take the toe of the marker and pull it up, 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 over, up, over, up, 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 over, up, over, over, and just a few dots at the what will become the very top of the grasses itself. Okay, so very similar to how we started the evening, but just a few dots to establish the very top of the grasses there. Okay. Box hedge, just a few ground level branches and then a general outline of where that hedge can be. It's pretty easy. And then a few flowers, same technique over here but shorter. Curve, 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 curve. And then, not that tulips are native to Indiana or anything, stab, 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 stab. Okay. All right. So grass, hedge, and a few flowers. Now, smaller scale, same technique, you just have to adjust for that size, for that scale or that size. I'll use a sign pen instead. Same technique, but I'll just use the sign pen. Flick, 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 overlap, flick, 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 limit, 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 flick, 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 flick. Okay. box hedge, general outline or size with a few ground level stems. Okay? Flowers. Curve, 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 stem, stem, and then just a little bit of pointillism there. Okay? So 2 different scales. Same techniques, but adjusting the media just so you have 2 different scales on the underlay level. Okay? Yeah?
What might you do, like paint or vine?
Like what?
Like vine on the ground?
Like crawling juniper or something like that?
Yeah.
Good question. By rotating the marker barrel, we can get kind of a variation of a line going. Okay. That could be something. Or that could be like Lily of the Valley, or yeah, or just a kind of a bed of stuff. So either by turning the barrel there or just by stabbing the barrel, you can get a few sense of some of those more non-lawn style ground covers there. So we'll start. We're almost starting to build up a few layers there. So okay. That's really wet, so I'm going to tape that down and pat it dry. It's extremely wet. If you leave it too wet, then when you bring your overlay layer on, it'll transfer onto it, and that would make you very sad, okay? If any of this stuff transfers onto this. So you do want to make sure your underlay layer is dry before you continue. Okay. Fine line pen, starting from the foreground and working our way back. So, an old draftsperson's trick for leafy broadleaf stuff are cursive S's and cursive G's. Ah, yes, an old trick. So the cursive G and the cursive S, when repeated, give the illusion of broadleaf, of a broadleaf thing. So maybe there are some S's and G's, S's and G's, S's and G's up in the tree. S's and G's give the illusion of broadleaf stuff. Okay. So maybe this is a crawling juniper or lily of the valley or one of those non-lawn style ground covers. S's and G's, S's and G's. We'll put those in front of the tree as well. Yeah, that looks like a small invasion of porgs or something like that. So, okay. All right. Behind that, we have these grasses now. So that general direction, using the fine line pen that we established with the marker, just as a guide, I'm going to pull now a series of lines. For every marker stroke, maybe 3 or 4 of those lines. Pull, pull, pull. Looks something like that. Okay. All right. Where we put the dots, I'm going to put a series of dots using the fine line pen. This is the top of the grass. These are the seedlings of the grass. I'm going to build up some darkness down here. Mr. Campbell when he works here on campus, and he's got 5 and 6 foot tall grasses. They start to build up like that, but they have a very soft top and very dense, dark base, right? And I just pull a bunch of lines up to give that almost illusion of hair, right? Notice how the lines are overlapping but also changing direction. So if a wind were to hit that, that whole thing would start to move. Okay. Tulip, or broadleaf flower, or each of the marker heads here is essentially the cup of the tulip. So you've got the letter U, the letter U, the letter U, the letter U, over and over again. Stem, and then broadleaf. Those wide green leaves of the tulip, overlapping, crossing over, going from the ground plane up and then back, up and back, up and back, up and back. And then stem, 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 stem. Big, thick, green leaves. Box hedge. A little bit of stem coming up from the ground, a lot of darkness, heavy layered texture. There's no light down there. Pulled, and then dots and dashes and texture, and then lots of pointillism. It's messy, fast, but it's okay. Because we're giving the illusion of different textures and different surfaces. There's also a lot of darkness down there where the stems meet the ground. There's a lot of dark, a lot of shadow down there. So don't be afraid to really layer that in. On the smaller scale, same technique, just half as much. So we have to use thinner line weight, lighter touch, less dots, a little bit less texture. Because when we half the scale, we have half the amount of detail. Same technique as before, just less of it. You just adjust the frequency and the heaviness of the technique. So the conifer tree, starting with a ground plane of some kind. We'll do the half-scale version of it. A simple line. It doesn't have to be straight per se. It could have a slight curvature to it, but just a simple line going up.
All the way up.
Yep. Yep. That's about 8 inches. Jeez. There we go. Okay. The conifer tree grows differently than the deciduous tree, doesn't it? How does it grow? How does it spread out? Okay. So it grows differently. So from that central stem is where all of the nutrition goes. So we need to establish sort of a general width of how wide we want our tree to be, and a general cone. Okay. Starting to think about Christmas again. Here we go. So just a general cone surrounding that central stem, and then pushing lines from that stem outward, 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 making subtle variations in basically these little arcs, trying to make each one a little bit different from the other until you get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller to the very top. Okay. Sometimes they line up, sometimes they don't. Having cut lawns for many years and trying to cut lawns underneath conifer trees, exploring the underworld underneath conifer trees, you know, full of needles and things like that, you start to understand the structure of how these things grow. But everything emanates from that central stem. If you need a reminder of how thick that stem is, take the heel of your marker and just push that up. Just a general reminder of how thick that stem will be. Okay. So this establishes the general area that the conifer is going to exist in, as well as its basic structure. Okay. Now another piece of trace paper. So overlay front, on the front, I'm going to grab my fine line pen and I'm just going to reinforce the ground plane as well as in a stop and go, almost dashed line. I'm going to just establish the general location of that center stem. This is a double line, very thin. I'm going to do basically a stop and go or a dashed line. I'm not going to make it a consistent line. I'm barely touching the paper, essentially making a dashed line going up. And I'm going to end that with a chicken foot. That's just going to tell me that's the top of the tree. No matter what, that's the top. I'm going to stop there with a three-fingered chicken foot. Okay. Okay. Then I will pick and choose a few of these branches, not all of them, some of them all, Just, again, that light dashed line. Conifers are so thick that we don't see a lot of the stem from the outside. But we just do need to remind ourselves on this overlay of the general structure of the tree. Okay, so that's about it. That's about as far as we see it there. Once we do that, we'll flip it over. Get our greens ready. So the same color palette we had before, unless you're dealing with a very specific species for blue spruce or otherwise, we can adjust our colors accordingly. But for the most part, we can use the same colors we had before. Starting with yellow-green, we look at the example over there, we see quite a bit of light coming through there. So this is fir, Doug fir, yellow spruce, right? Yes. It's not Scotch pine, it's not any of those. So starting from the central stem, we have to work our way out, whether we're going to the left or to the right. We're essentially using the sweeping technique that we practiced earlier. So with my yellow-green, I'm going to sweep out to a point, out and to a point, like a bunch of mustaches. Out and to a point, out and to a point, out and to a point. Make sense? Our lines there are basically hinting at the general structure of this thing. Now keep in mind, if you're standing next to one of these trees, some of these branches are coming towards you as well. They're not just going right to the left or to the right. There are branches coming directly towards you as the viewer. So a shortened version like this right here is that suggestion of that branch coming towards you, as well as the ones going to the left or the right. The conifer does start to layer up in those directions because they are radiating from that central stem. But there are branches coming towards the viewer as well, not just going to the left or the right. Same technique we studied earlier. Getting thinner and thinner and smaller as we go up. That was my yellow-green layer. Now I'll take my medium green, and I'm going to layer it underneath, underneath, underneath. Keeping in mind that there are some branches coming directly towards me, the viewer. Underneath, underneath, underneath. Underneath. So those of you who send Christmas cards, this will be your drawing for next year. No. Just kidding. Nobody sends Christmas cards anymore. I used to send 45 cards. You know how many I got back? 4. So I stopped sending cards. 45 to 4. What a terrible ratio. Anyway. A little bit of pointillism too, a few dots here and there. Just each green that you layer you add, just make sure you layer in a few things there as well. Now we'll go to slate green. Layering underneath, 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 underneath. emerald green just as pointillism. Emerald green as pointillism, pointillism, pointillism. The darkest areas underneath each layer of lateral branches, creating that illusion of shade as a series of layers. Gray, just a little bit of gray, just all the way up, just reinforcing the stem. Just a little bit of gray reinforcing that stem. That's it. And a little bit of blueberry here and there. Maybe on the shaded side of a tree. And then the dark, dark shadowed areas, because it gets dark in there. It really does. When I was cutting lawns, I had to push the mower underneath these things. I had to lift up the branch with one hand and push the mower underneath. And so, find a cat under there or something like that. What's Fluffy doing here? I don't know. Then, take your colored pencils again, starting from the stem and feathering your way out, from the stem and out, stem and out, stem and out. Just feather a layer of colored pencil over those marker layers. Stem out, stem out, stem out. Feather a layer of colored pencil from the stem, working your way out, just to unify those marker layers together and to finish out any green that might be there at the very top near that chicken foot. Darkness where you need it. So from the stem, always work the stem up and down and then work your way out. Out, out, out. There's a lot of depth here, so there's a lot of darkness. And we've got to account for the branches coming toward us, right? Right? We're getting that illusion of thickness because we've got branches coming towards the viewer. Flip that over. Back on the front, fine line pen. Reinforce each layer of branch with texture. These are like wings, right? Like feathers. Just reinforce each layer of stuff. Lots of dots too. Okay. And that is a typical Doug fir or yellow spruce. Stop the video. Okay, so gentle, slight curve, and then a firework, like a firework on 4th of July. Probably 4, 5, or even 6 of these radiating and yet curving lines coming from this central point. Do this for each palm. Okay, so they're like fireworks, right? Fireworks shell fires off from the ground, it radiates up to the sky, it explodes and sends a few of those. Okay. Take your marker now. Same as the deciduous tree, take the full chisel of the marker, starting at the ground level, and as you make this entire 8-inch journey, you're going to make 1/4 turn. Until at the very top, the toe of the marker is pointing up. So with the full chisel, at the bottom here, as we go up, we're making a gradual 1/4 turn. Full chisel, gradual 1/4 turn. Full chisel, gradual 1/4 turn. Well, even then, this looks a little thick, so I'll probably adjust it on the overlay. But this gives us a gradual taper as we go up the body of this particular palm. Which palm is this, folks? Coconut palm?
Yeah.
Okay. Bring back our overlay. I need a medium green, so probably either slate green or emerald green. Same technique we practiced earlier, okay? So your guideline is here, you just now have to pull the fronds off of that general guideline. So if I start up here and I'm pulling, all the way out to there, and I work my way back. Don't worry about overlapping. They all overlap. That's what the palm looks like, right? Right? Don't worry about overlapping. I'm feathering out those palm fronds from each central line. I have to account for fronds that are heading backwards, right, away into the distance, as well as fronds that are coming towards us. So. I'm going to try a different color. Maybe get some color variation in there. I can layer in grass green into there, work that in. It's kind of interesting when AD markers displace each other. There's some different effects. Some folks call that a wet on wet technique, where the marker color is in fact displacing the other marker color. Ooh, I like that. Ooh. All right, I like slate green on top of grass green, by the way. That works pretty well. Continue to experiment with your colors, get to know them. Drawing these palm trees is the best antidote to February weather, so it Now, our friend Gray comes in. Get a gray marker, and the seed pods, sort of in the center. There's some darkness in there. Okay, just where the seed pods collect, where the coconut fruits occur. And we can just kind of paint the area where that trunk's going to be with some gray. Where am I? Am I in the front? Oh dear. Oh, anyway. Okay, so we've got some layers of color going. General outline of the stem. I just need to establish the general area of what that is, the general width. I might use the marker width, I might narrow it a little bit. I'm not confident with the full marker width there, but so I'm gonna narrow it a little bit and just kind of dash in where that stem is. I've already painted in gray where that occurs, and then I'll flip it over. Ooh. Now the underlay is distracting me, so I need to remove that. Okay. Now, on the real front, here I can reinforce the structure of each palm frond. Reinforce and start to give even additional line work to reinforce the texture of the fronds as they come towards us, as they overlap, and as they recede away from us. Some of the palm fronds are coming towards the viewer, some are going away. At any rate, when we get to the seed pod where the coconuts are, it's really dark in there. It's very dark in there, so don't be afraid to really fire in some texture, okay, where that occurs, because it gets pretty dark up there. This line work is just reinforcing what the marker strokes were doing and reinforces the illusion of the texture of the fronds as they layer together. And then reinforce sort of the coconut seed pod area at the top of the stem. We can really, the texture of these stems is really quite ruddy, so I'll add quite a bit of texture on the way down. quite rough. So it's the marker color and the line work working together to give the illusion of what's happening here. And they all kind of jumble together at the top. So don't be afraid of a mess, because it'll be messy. Okay. Just keep in mind that some of these fronds will be coming towards you, some will be layering behind. Just as long as they don't all go to the side or the side. Too many folks, cartoon versions of palms and things like that only have branches going to the sides. There's none that come towards you. You have to have a few branches coming towards the viewer. So there's the weirdly juxtaposed conifer and palm tree set for your February evening here at Ball State.